Hello and welcome to our first show, Unreasonable Adjustments. My name is Siobhan, and I'm an Asian guy in a wheelchair with glasses and a hat, and this is Dennis.
Hey, I'm Dennis. I'm a white person with glasses, short blue hair, and in the background you can see my blue cell shade, a little bit of my flat.
So, Unreasonable Adjustments came out of last year's uh, disability show that we did for the World Transformed. And just off the back of that, all of us thought we should get together and, take this whole thing further. And out of that grew um, this show. And hopefully we'll tell you a bit more about it as we go on. So over to you, Dennis. Talk about the accessibility and stuff.
Yep, thanks, Shabazz. So this show, it's a new experiment for our collective. It's a bit like trying to drive a racing car while you're still building it at the same time. So there might be some bumps along the way. Let's hope they're not all mine. And just to let you know, we have Anne-Marie joining us throughout the show. Anne-Marie is our BSL interpreter, and we're advising people who use closed captions to please use YouTube or Facebook's inbuilt features for the live transcripts. We are going to be developing accessibility as we go along, though, so please let us know if you have any problems today. Go ahead, Shabazz.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a bit more about what we're here to try and do because I know for most people it's probably come out of the blue. So, yeah, I just wanted to not take up too much time, but I wanted to say that we're here to plant, as far as I'm concerned, we're here to plant a flag in the ground and to create solutions as well as raise problems because I feel that we everybody knows the issues, but we need to create solutions and we need to show that there's creativity around and ideas available if people want to take them up. So yeah, we're just here to create change and create change for everybody in society. And this show isn't just for disabled people. Yeah, it is run and developed by disabled people, but it's for society at large, really. So, anyway, over to you, Dennis.
Well, Shabazz, in a minute we're going to be introducing members of the group, but first I just wanted to ask you, how did this show come about? It was to do with last year's festival, wasn't it?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, it was to do with the World Transformed who are hosting us today. Thank you to them. Big shout out to them. But hopefully we can outgrow them and and create a better society. And yeah, it just came out of our disability justice conversation that thanks to Edie, who is also one of our mem our group members and who you'll be hearing from in the show, they created the disability justice discussion, and out of that we all thought we have to take this further, and out of that grew this idea. Over to you, Dennis.
Cheers, Shabazz. So now on with our fabulous show. And we're going to start with some introductions. Shabazz, would you mind introducing yourself first? Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Shabazz Mohammed. I'm a disabled activist, filmmaker, and writer, and I've done various other bits of creative work. And I just got involved in this project, and I just want to see how far we can go. Over to you, Dennis.
Nice one. Yep, I'm also a disabled activist like Shabazz. And I've been involved in quite a few different things, from doing disability arts to protesting, and now these days trying to help on committees. So, but this is a really exciting new project for me because I've never done a show before, and especially not with Shabazz. So this is really, really excellent. So next, we're going to introduce you to some of the other members of our group.
And there's a hell of a lot of us.
Hello. Thanks for doing such a great job, Shabazz and Dennis. Thanks, Anne-Marie. My name's Andrew. I'm one of the steering group members for The World Transformed. I'm a white, middle-aged guy with dark, short cropped hair in a red t-shirt sat on a stripy chair. I've heard about this project after seeing the festival session last year, and I are trying to help with some of the tech side of things and also learn from the great people here. So I've just got another couple of intro videos from a couple of our collective, and I hope every month we'll learn a bit more about everybody. So bear with me whilst I try and present a little bit here and do tech at the same time. So I'm just going to bring up the videos a moment.
Hello, I am Siobhan. I'm a theatre maker and film director. I am interested in the intersection between disability justice and climate justice, and I am currently organising around COVID as an access issue.
Okay, and the next one will be TIGs. Apologies, Anne-Marie, the tech went slightly wrong there. Let me just try that again.
Hi, my name is Tiggs. My pronouns are they, them. I came part of this project through going to the session at TWT, and we all met afterwards and decided that we should try and do something, and I'm here helping where I can. In terms of what disability justice means to me, I feel like I have more learning to do around disability justice, but I feel like it is social justice for everyone and looking at the interconnectedness of all the other social justices and how capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, just everything interconnects together. And the reason, it's important to me is because I want a better world and society for everyone.
Great, so it's so good to hear about the group. We're going to be developing things over the next couple of months so that more people can be involved in all kinds of different ways. Now I'm going to step out and I'm going to introduce you to to a member of the group that you've just been introduced to, Siobhan, who's going to take us through the next section. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Siobhan. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman in her 30s with long reddish hair. I'm wearing a pink shirt and there are multicoloured posters in my background. I'm really excited to be a part of this collective, to learn together and to think, as Tiggs just mentioned, about how to make the world a better place. So we've heard from Shabazz and Dennis and Tiggs in their video about how this collective came about, and Unreasonable Adjustments is a show that will be running monthly that will be exploring disability justice. And then we thought it was important to explain a little bit about the background of disability justice as a term. So that's what I'm going to do in this section here. So we're aware that disability justice is a term that is often misused and misunderstood, and that there are different understandings around it. But one of our collective members, Andy, has done some work putting together some thoughts about the history of the terminology and the collective that it arose from. So thank you to Andy for that. And I'm going to share some of those thoughts now. So disability justice is a social justice movement apologies, which focuses on examining disability and ableism as they relate to other forms of oppression and identity, such as race, class, and gender. It was developed in 2005 by the Disability Justice Collective, a group including Patty Byrne, Mia Mingus, Stacey Milburn, and Leroy Moore. It's a framework that values access, self-determination, and an expectation of difference. An expectation of difference means that we expect difference in disability, identity, and culture. Some of the principles of disability justice include intersectionality, the leadership of those most impacted, anti-capitalism, cross-movement solidarity, wholeness, sustainability, cross-disability solidarity, interdependence, collective access, and, importantly, collective liberation. I think it's really important that we've been working as a collective to create this show and to explore ideas around disability justice and looking at how we can live in the ways we want the world to improve as well. So the disability justice framework asserts that we must include the experiences of multiply marginalised people with disabilities, such as people of colour, immigrants, LGBTQIA+ people, homeless people, incarcerated people, people who have had their ancestral land stolen. And disability justice looks at all of these issues, recognising how diverse systems of oppression interact and reinforce each other. Because of this broader focus, the disability justice movement is the most comprehensive way to create lasting change for people with disabilities and people who are multiply marginalised. It builds on the disability rights movement, taking a more comprehensive approach to help secure rights for disabled people by recognising the intersectionality of disabled people who belong to additional marginalised communities. As I said at the beginning, it's a term that is often misused and misunderstood. And as such, it's something that we want to continue discussing within this show. It is at the core of our organising, looking at the ways that different oppressions intersect and how we can create true disability justice is the reason that we came together. And we will definitely be expanding upon this idea in future shows. We'll be hearing from different members of the collective. We'll be having conversations around these issues. So it'll be a little bit more interesting than just me presenting things to you, I promise. And it's something that we'd love to hear your thoughts on as well. So if you're watching this show and you would like to submit any ideas that you have around what disability justice means to you, please do let us know. And as I said, we will continue this conversation in different formats, in different shows, which will be happening monthly. So the next section of this show will be an interview with Edie, who is a member of our collective, and they are interviewing Micha Frazer-Carroll, whose book Mad World, The Politics of Mental Health was published just this week. So hot off the press, I will hand you over to Edie and Misha.
Welcome to our special guest portion of Unreasonable Adjustments, where we get to speak to someone who's doing some really interesting stuff in the land of disability justice and find out a bit more about how things are from their perspective. For our first ever episode, our guest is one of our panelists from our session at TWT in 2022. We're joined by Micha Frazer-Carroll. She's a columnist at The Independent. She's previously edited for Gowden, The Guardian, and Blueprint, a mental health magazine she founded. She's written for Vogue, HuffPost, Huck and Dazed, and she was nominated for the Comment Awards Fresh New Voice of the Year Award and the Observer Anthony Burgess Award for Arts Criticism. Misha is a writer, a journalist, many other things, and she uses her work to challenge systems of power, which leads nicely on to why she's talking to us today, because just out is her new book, Mad World, The Politics of Mental Health, which is a really accessible, engaging and bold introduction to the mental health through a political lens for anybody who wants to understand it. But Misha, what's quite unique about how you've been writing is about your explicit focus on the disability justice lens of your work. So welcome, and can you tell us a bit about why you framed your work in this way and what that means to you?
Yes. So thank you for having me, Edie. As you said, Mad World is a book that tries to carve out a radical political approach to mental health. And really, really central to the book for me was taking a disability justice approach. And this is something that I felt I hadn't seen explicitly kind of mentioned or analysed in a lot of writing and discussion that I was seeing around mental health happening in the mainstream, but actually also on the left. So taking a disability justice lens felt really, really key to me. And for anyone who's not aware of kind of the origins of disability justice, it was carved out, there were kind of 10 principles carved out by a group of people, including a lot of people involved in a North American collective called Sins Invalid. And disability justice was kind of a response to what they saw as some of the shortcomings of the disability rights movement, which took place in kind of the 20th century. And central to disability justice were principles like intersectionality, taking an anti-capitalist, explicitly anti-capitalist politic, cross-impairment and cross-movement organizing, and there are kind of lots of other ones as well. But I think this felt crucial to me because approaching mental health intersectionally, I think, is not something that I had seen done a lot around the time that I started writing this book. And also approaching mental health in a way that actually linked it up with physical health and physical disability was not something that I'd seen done very much either. And I also just think there's a lot of radical organizing and scholarship that's historically taken place in disability rights and disability justice movements that has not really been drawn upon when we talk about mental health. For example, the social model of disability. I'm sure many listeners to this podcast will be aware of the social model, but that's not something that's talked about very much in the mental health space. Also, crip theory, which was carved out by an academic called Robert McCrua, that I think is a really interesting kind of lens to shed on mental health. But I also think that disability justice, kind of one of the core principles is about kind of collective care and mutual aid and looking after one another. And I'm sure we'll go on to this, but that's kind of one of the central arguments that I make towards the end of the book, is that we need to be supporting and offering mutual aid to one another when the state fails us when it comes to our mental health.
It's interesting that, given the last few years and what we've seen with the pandemic and the lockdowns, and also the rise of conversations in left organising and activism around collective care and around burnout, and talking a bit more about well-being, but still feeling like there's probably a bridge to traverse, right, into thinking through that disability justice lens. I'm not asking you to provide a solution, but what do you think the roadmap could be from where we are now, and the fact that we are beginning to have, to see this, how central some of those principles are in the work that we're doing, rather than like an aside that gets added on when people have the time?
We are seeing mental health talked about a lot more. And this is something that I kind of acknowledge in the introduction to the book. But I still, in many ways, feel like the ways that we discuss it can still be quite individualist. So I say kind of, we talk about mental health sometimes as something that we are, identity, or as something that we have, kind of property. So like, I have this diagnosis, or I have this mental health condition, but we don't necessarily, I think, still talk kind of in a big structural way about the ways that our mental health is actually harmed by the capitalist system, and by forces like neoliberalism, poverty, racism, ableism. And I think while we can kind of see these conversations, like, I do think they're developing, I think there's still like much more scope to be looking really large scale, not just at our individual experiences of mental health or distress, but actually talking about what are the forces in society that impact our mental health and how can we grasp them at the root. I critique a little bit, again, in the introduction of the book, kind of some of the ways that we put a lot of individual emphasis on things like, everyone's like, get therapy, it's crucial that everybody gets therapy. Or if you're experiencing mental distress, like, everyone should be doing mindfulness, everyone should be doing yoga, everyone should be going to their GP, like, to get meds. And while I make really clear that I don't think any of these approaches are bad things, I think they can they can often be pathways to healing. I think an exclusive focus on these things sometimes means that we don't also focus on actually how can we organize to create a society where we have less suffering in the first place, and where we don't have to retrospectively kind of remedy our distress after the fact, or after we've already got to crisis point.
That's one thing I think is really interesting about your book, is when you talk about how so much of the management of mental health is about thinking about the worker, and how actually the history of what's considered disability is related to who does and doesn't conform into the ability to be a worker, as opposed to the fact that if we were taking it out of a capitalist system, the management of some mental health experiences would be a lot different. What do you think that we can gain from sort of mad perspectives when we are trying to do anti-capitalist work, but maybe some groups not necessarily thinking about mental health as being part of that?
So one thing I think is really crucial about mad thinking is just thinking outside of the bounds of what we think of or have internalized as logical, natural, sane. And this is something that I play with quite a bit, kind of this idea that, you know, logic, actually in our society, what we think of as logic is the logic of the market, it's the logic of the death of the planet, it's the logic of the death of oppressed people. You know, these things are propped up often as just common sense, this is the way that the world is. And I think that mad thinking, by definition, often means thinking outside the box, or thinking in very strange and creative ways, or thinking of things that, you know, don't sound sane to the average person, but actually that's the kind of thinking I think that we need to craft revolutionary responses that push against the bounds of the society that we currently live in. And I think that thing that you touched on as well, about how our conception of health, whether it's mental health, physical health, is so shaped by capitalist work, is something that I think we can also across the left and kind of progressive or radical movements, that's something that I think we can all learn from. It's quite a crucial argument that I make in the book, is kind of this constructivist and what's called like a materialist approach, which draws on a few people, but specifically the ideas of Mike Oliver, who was a disabled theorist, who talks about this idea that actually, if you look across history, some things that are now considered disability actually were not considered disabling in the past, because we had different economic and social systems of organization. And it's actually only when we got into this very factory-based and industrialized, and now kind of we've got, you know, more like office-based kind of work, that you see these new disabling categories emerging. And I think that's something that I think we can all learn from, and actually helps us all understand more about how to organize as workers, when we question the idea that it's natural that some people just can't participate in work. And we question, for example, you know, is, for example, the benefit system just a natural, inevitable thing? Or actually, could we create a world where people who didn't work, or people who did also labor, all were liberated, and all weren't necessarily just categorized depending on their ability to produce for profit?
Definitely. And what you can get from opening those floodgates of thought is just so much richness in the way that you engage with other people, right? And breaking the bounds of understanding, through the lens of work, and actually seeing what are the ways we want to set up the world for people to thrive in and not suffer, that aren't related to whether or not they are reliant on wage labor, is a powerful thing we should all be aspiring for. Misha, not everybody has written a book. I haven't written a book, and I'm sure many of the people listening, watching, engaging haven't. Can you tell us a bit about the process of making Mad World a reality, and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, so writing a book is really hard, and I feel like this is something that most people instinctively know, but even after I kind of signed up for it, I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And I think this is something that interacts with disability as well. Like, I'm a very neurodivergent person, and I found that the idea of writing a linear argument, start to finish, that was like perfectly planned out, really wasn't a thing for me. And so I always say I kind of wrote the book in circles. I went round and around, and some chapters I would say there were probably like 10 drafts of them. And the book actually changed a lot throughout that drafting and redrafting process. So yeah, I think writing the book in some ways was kind of a bit of a process of madness. But I do think ultimately it was really nice to see it evolve and become something very different to what it was planned to be in the beginning. So yeah, complex, but in some ways very fruitful.
And I noticed you wrote in the book about how it, even though it's got your name in it, it's a collaborative effort. And why did that feel important for you to note, considering it's probably true for many books?
Because I think the publishing industry is very individualistic. Like that's just part of kind of how you profit in the publishing industry. There's a lot of focus on individual authors and, you know, your faces like in the book and your names on the spine and this kind of thing. That's part of how they sell books. But it feels especially crucial, I think, in a book that's trying to root itself in radical politics and organizing, to actually name all of the people whose work and thinking influenced me. Some of it is explicit, some of it is just people who were really influential to me, kind of my thinking over the years. But yeah, I think it's Sara Ahmed who talks about citation as a feminist practice and how it's really crucial to actually cite your sources and to think politically about who do you think of as, you know, obviously you cite this person, or oh, it wouldn't make sense to cite that person. And yeah, I tried to also just cite like my friends and things like that, because they're just as influential to me as kind of, you know, theorists and people like this.
We have 2 quickfire questions, which is hopefully something that we continue to do in future episodes. The first is, tell us about a space or some people or resources that are currently inspiring your thinking around disability justice.
So firstly, I wanted to shout out to all of the anti-carceral organising that's happening in the UK, but also there are some groups globally that are inspiring me. So just a few names. Project Let's in the US are doing really amazing anti-carceral mental health organising. Mental Health First is another group in the US that are doing mental health crisis response that doesn't involve police. Cradle Community in the UK, the Campaign for Psych Abolition also in the UK, and then also groups that we wouldn't necessarily always think of as doing mental health work, but I think all liberation work is mental health work. So Sisters Uncut, Black Lives Matter, No More Exclusions, and the National Survivor User Network as well, I wanted to shout out to.
Thanks for that great list that people can go and enjoy afterwards. Second quickfire recommendation question is, if people are coming to this podcast, they're beginning to think about disability justice, and they're like, oh, where do I get started apart from this fantastic platform that they're already engaged in now? What one resource would you say people should go to maybe have a useful jumping off point?
So I've already referenced it, but I think it's so accessible and such a good introduction, especially because disability justice is a phrase we hear thrown around quite a lot. And it's not always actually used in a way that reflects its kind of original principles. So I would refer you to the 10 Principles of Disability Justice by Sins Invalid. And that gives such a good outline of what disability justice is really about and how it also differs from disability rights.
That's a really beautiful recommendation. Thank you so much for your time, Misha. Really great to have you back in the TWT space. And for those of you who are listening to us in the future, because this was pre-recorded, you can order MadWorld now, and there will hopefully be a link popping up somewhere where you can do that. And you can also follow Misha and keep an eye on all her MadWorld related work and beyond.
Thank you.
So we're back, Dennis.
Yeah, we're back.
That was a fantastic interview, wasn't it?
Oh, that was an absolutely cracking interview with Misha and Edie. I was jumping around in my wheelchair going, yes, yes, quite a lot. And also I thought it was great, the section before that with that Andy and Siobhan had prepared, sort of talking about the principles of disability justice and listing those, because I thought that was really helpful.
Siobhan, I didn't realise Siobhan's got such charisma and such personality and energy. I mean, she should be doing our job, you know.
I was just thinking that. I wonder if we can get her to do it next time.
Yeah, maybe we should, because I think they'll get sick of the sight of us too. Anyway, is there anything you'd like to say before we wrap up? Because we're coming
No,
towards
just
the end of the show.
yeah, only just to say that I hope everyone who's been watching enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it and putting it together. And now it's over to you to talk about how to get more involved.
Yeah, it's been a long, hard slog, and to get this off the road and running, or rolling, or whatever you want to fucking call it, it's not easy to make a show, and especially when on very limited budget and very limited time. And yeah, I just wanted to say to the audience, anybody watching, please forgive any mistakes any of us have made, because it's our first time doing this together, and I know that I probably got the name of the show wrong at the start, and I was probably a second or two late starting, so apologies for that. And the way to get involved is, and particularly we want to encourage more disabled people to volunteer and get involved in the TWT, because it just helps, create a better conversation and a better society and a better organization, because it'd be more diverse. It's not that we just think disabled people should volunteer, because that's ridiculous, but we're just saying that. Well, I'm just saying, I can't speak for everyone. I'm just saying that we need to get more disabled people out there into the organization. But like I said at the start, this show isn't just for disabled people. This is for wider society at large. So we want to build a better country and a better world and a better society. So please help us do that. And any suggestions or any feedback, constructive or unconstructive, it's all welcome. So just get involved, and I'm sure we'll be sharing all the links and all the emails and all that. And all that remains for me to tell you is that, unless Dennis wants to say anything else before I close, do you want to say anything else to this?
No, I just wanted to remind anyone that already knows, and just mention for anyone who doesn't know, that the next World Transform Festival is coming up in the autumn. So if you'd like to submit a session proposal, to volunteer, or to join in, or buy tickets, that information will be dropping down below for you. And yes, so all the other links that we've mentioned should also appear below for you. And just say thank you to everyone in running the show, deciding what was going to be in it, and who's been tuning in this afternoon, watching us. Back to you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to let everybody know our next show will be the 26th of July. So all that remains to be said is bye bye, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye. Over and out.